Hey everybody, this is Sierra from the Local History and Genealogy Department at Covington. And today we are going to kick off the summer learning series on how to do property record research. And so today's session is going to focus on deed records. So I'm really excited to get this started, and we'll learn more about the deed process. Okay, so over the summer, we're going to talk about property record research. We're going to do give you some help on research strategies for, documenting and learning more about the history of your house or your property. So today, we're going to do a little bit more about deed research. In July, I'm going to talk about what you can find in city directories. And then in August, we are going to wrap it up with census records. So there will be something every summer or every month over the summer, and I hope you join me and you learn some good stuff about how to do property research and maybe feel a little bit more comfortable tackling this kind of project. Okay, so today we're starting out with the deed research. So let's talk about what deed research is. So a lot of times when people come in and say they want to know the history of their house, they're pretty much starting from scratch. So we always recommend that you start by doing a deed search on your property. And we do that because it gives you a lot of great information. It's kind of helps you build a timeline about the people that have lived in your house as far as who's owned it, or has it been passed down from generations, or has it been bought and sold several times between different families. So basically we're asking you to do the process of basically documenting and printing out those deed records so that you can show who's owned it and when, and kind of create a timeline for the house. And this is really important because it will help you with the researching the families and finding out who's lived there. Where can you find deeds? So deeds can be held in many different places, and a lot of times deeds are held locally at the courthouse or in a county records room. It just depends on the state that you're in. So here in Kentucky, the clerk's office usually has these types of records in the local courthouse. Sometimes these records in other states might be found in an auditor's office, or they might have something called a PVA office. So keep in mind that in every state it might be a little different, but basically there is one central location for deeds, usually at the county level courthouse. So deeds have also been microfilmed and digitized. And so sometimes you can find early deeds and early land records at your local library or at a state archives. In Kentucky, we have KDLA, the Kentucky Department for Libraries and Archives. And so they may have microfilm property and deed records there at a central location. So take advantage of your local libraries and archives and see what they have available on microfilm. And also if anybody's ever created an index for those records that you could use at your local library. Deed records and property records have also been digitized, and so sometimes they are available online. A good example of that is that Family Search has recently put many deed records online, and they've been basically just scanning their microfilm collection of deed records. So pay attention to what is online as well, because you might be able to find some of this information before you have to visit a courthouse. So what do deeds tell you? I know a lot of times people want to know like who built their house or when their house was built, or find like an original blueprint, but a lot of times that information isn't exactly explicitly stated in a deed. Deeds usually tell you more about the ownership of the property, the price of the sale, the size of the property, and other kind of like identifying information about the property. Early deeds a lot of times tell you more about the types of trees that were found on the property, because those were the markers of the property. So keep that in mind. You might find like there's geographic features like creeks, rivers, trees, orchards, things like that to describe the boundaries of the property. Later deeds usually don't tell you things like what kind of, they might say that the building is on a property, but it might not tell you more about the building itself. Deeds can also give you clues about familial relationships. So sometimes a property is passed down from parent to child. Sometimes it's grandparent to grandchild. It just depends on the family and who is still living or who was chosen to inherit the property. So keep those things in mind too when you're doing deed research, that they might be able to help you with your genealogy questions as well. Here's a few example deeds. They're all from different time periods. The earliest deeds all have script writing. They are usually, there's no formatting to those, so they all look a little different. They're written in big ledgers that are about usually 11 by 17 almost size, and it's usually, it tells you who the property is being conveyed to, the sum of the property sale, and a description of the property. The further you go in time and the more modern you get, deeds often have a kind of like a uniform format. So when you go to look through those books, you'll know exactly where like the names are, the witnesses, a description of the property, information about whether or not, it's making sure that it doesn't have liens or any type of implications on the sale of the property. And then the later ones are also usually have been typewritten or with like a typewriter, or they could be now on a computer. So and be computer generated. So keep that in mind. So the more recent ones are easier to read, definitely, because they're computerized, but the earliest ones are in script writing, and you'll want to make sure that you take your time with the ones that are in script, because sometimes handwriting can be very difficult to read. Okay, so when you're looking at deeds, there's some commonly used terms or elements that can be found on a deed, and I just want to go through those a little bit. So a grantee is the buyer, a grantor is the seller. Usually a deed has a date of sale, so that is the day that the property was sold. So when money exchanged hands, when paperwork was signed. A date of recording is actually when the county clerk's office recorded the sale of the property. So that's the date the deed was recorded with the local government. So it can be and often is different than the date of the sale. It just depends on the time period. Deeds can also tell you things about the nature of the sale. So things like the condition and consideration. So that's often when you see like a seller saying that they have a valid right to the title, that someone else has, made sure that they have a valid right to the title, and that the land is free to be sold, and that no one has claims to that property as far as inheritances. So keep that in mind when you look at deeds. Those types of elements might be available. A dower release is often found on older deeds, and they're not as popular. Like when I've looked at like our Kenton County deeds, our early ones, but earlier deeds than that often do have a dower release, and that just basically says that this was the wife's inherited property and it is being sold of her own free will. A lot of times the clerk will say that they took the wife aside and made sure the sale was in her interest and what she wanted, and then they sign off on that as witnesses. So that's kind of an interesting way to know maybe more about the history of the property, is if it was inherited from the wife's side of the family or the husband. Witnesses are also important on deeds. You need at least 2 witnesses for a deed transaction, but pay attention to witnesses, because sometimes that's family members, sometimes that's neighbors. So sometimes that can be a clue as to who was interested in the selling of this property. All right, so when we do deed research, basically deeds can be researched in an easy way if you start with the more modern, because those records are easier to read, and then you go from that book and page number and keep going back, because each deed book is going to tell you, in theory, a previous book and page number that property was bought and sold on. I would highly recommend doing modern to older because it's a lot easier to follow the trail. And then when you get into the older records, sometimes that can be difficult because information is missing. So what you want to do is always make sure that you look for an index to deeds, because if you get stuck where there's no paper trail to tell you the next deed book and page, you might be able to figure it out based on an index. Now, something about indexes to keep in mind is that generally they're in two parts. So one is going to be for an index of the buyers, and another is going to be the index of the sellers. So if you have someone who's bought and sold a lot of property in an area, you're going to want to compare those indexes to make sure that you haven't missed a property, because indexes aren't always 100% correct. So look at both of those indexing options. Another thing to keep in mind when you actually get to the courthouse and do deed research is that deed books are often large and they are awkward. As you can see from this picture here, these deed books are probably 11 by 17. They have metal binding, and there's probably over 1,500 pages in each one of those books. I have pulled many of these types of books, and they weigh anywhere between 5 and 15 pounds. It just depends on the book. So if you are not able to lift heavy books, you'll definitely want to bring a friend with you to help you go through the deed books. Not every courthouse location is going to have a clerk that's available to help you pull deed books, so keep that in mind. You'll want to make sure that you are able to have someone help you do that. Another thing about when you're going through the deed books is to know your photocopying rules and options. A lot of times you can find a photocopier on site. Some places will just let you take cell phone pictures. Some places have a scanner. I would recommend calling the courthouse ahead of time to find out what these rules are and what you're allowed to scan and photocopy, and if you can bring like a cell phone or a tablet and take a picture, because flipping these books sometimes to scan them is extremely difficult. So keep that in mind. All right. So if you're at home and you want to get started on deed research and you're not able to visit like a local courthouse, there are some things that you can do. In Kentucky, the county clerk or PVA might have a website that already has some of the deeds indexed on there. Sometimes these are free and sometimes you have to pay for that service, so keep that in mind. Another option is to look in the catalog at Family Search. I have here put a picture of the Kenton County catalog for Family Search, because they have deed records for, it looks like almost from 1840 to almost 1965 yeah, 1965. So they have almost 200 or over 100 years of deeds available, and you can look at those and browse them like the microfilm. So you don't have to actually lift heavy books in order to use those. Family Search is in the process of adding these types of records, so not every county is going to have these types of records. So you'll need to go to the catalog on Family Search to look and see what they have for your particular county. Another thing to look for online is to see if your local library has these items available at the branch, or if there's an index available. Sometimes you can call, and if it's an index, someone would be able to do a lookup for you to see if there's a particular surname in that book. So those are all options from doing things from home. A kind of outside the box research tip as far as deed records is that a lot of times online newspaper access is available from home. And so you can look for articles about property transfers, sales, and taxes in the local newspaper. You'll want to look for the surname of the person. You'll want to look for the address. You'll want to look for the words property, transfers, real estate, sales, taxes, liens, mortgages, any word that you can associate with basically deed research and property records. And keep in mind that if you have a KCPL card, you can get digital access to the Historical Kentucky Post and Cincinnati Enquirer. And these, I know both of these newspapers have local real estate information in them. Not every property that has been bought and sold will be in the newspaper, but you might get lucky and find one that you're interested in. So keep that in your hat as another way to research deeds, or at least property records. All right. If you have any questions about deed research, please contact us. Deed research is very specific to where you're researching, so we might be able to give you more detailed answers. But do look at the county courthouse and see if you could, when you can visit or when their hours are, and feel. I hope you feel more confident after watching this, going in there and doing research, and pulling the books and finding the information that you need. If you have more questions, though, you can definitely reach us at our phone is 962-4070. You can email us your questions at history@kentonlibrary.org, and you can also find us online at kentonlibrary.org/genealogy. So if you have property research questions or questions about doing deed research, please reach out to us. We're happy to help. Another thing that I wanted to share is that this week is the kickoff for Summer Reading Club, or Summer Reading Celebration, and this year's theme is Reading Colors Your World, and you can find more information about Summer Reading Celebration at kentonlibrary.org/SRC. There are prizes for adults, kids, and teens, so everyone is welcome to participate and join the fun. So I want to thank you for watching. And if you have any questions, please contact us. I read all of the emails that come through the history account, so I am the one that will see that email, and I'm happy to help you with your research. All right, thanks for joining.